Welcome back to Market to Market. The Seafood Industry Development Company Limited has been mandated by the government to partner with all stakeholders to ensure that the seafood industry of this country attains viability on a sustainable basis in the shortest possible time. Join me now as I chat with Dr. Doon Ramsaroop, CEO of SIDC, about the state of the industry. Is the local seafood industry a viable one?
Well, at present, I would hazard a guess and say that it is not, because we have to import substantial amounts of fish to meet local demand.
How much of, or what percentage of local consumption is imported and what percentage is produced locally?
Offhand, I can't say. I really can't say offhand what is imported. I know in tilapia, for instance, we import about 100 tons of tilapia fillets alone from mostly China. We do import a lot of fish from Guyana and Suriname and other countries in the region. I don't have the figure, the total figure for everything, but I know it's substantial. I don't want to hazard a guess.
Are there plans to make the industry more viable?
Well, there were plans, and that's why this company was set up. One of the first things that has to be done, though, is that they have to modernize the legislation that regulates and manages the industry. We currently operate with laws that date back to 1916. And there have been several attempts since the 1990s to bring in new legislation to bring about a management regime, which is sorely needed for the fishing industry to be brought back to sustainability. At present, we operate what is called an open fishery, so that anybody can fish almost anywhere, catch almost anything, except for turtles and a few other species, at any time in the year, at any size, and whether they have eggs or not, and there are no restrictions. So as a result of this, you have no control, and once you have no control, you will have a resource that is going to continue to deplete and eventually become non-sustainable.
Do we export any of our seafood?
We do export seafood. We do export a range of seafood that are caught locally. It includes snappers, several other species like, well, whenever they have, carried kingfish, grouper, cutlass fish, croakers, and so on and so forth. We do have tunas being brought in by the longline fleet, which is a newer fleet, and they fish way offshore. And so we have tuna also being exported as a fresh product in fairly substantial amounts.
You mentioned legislation before, and my understanding is that the minister is ready to bring the new legislation to Parliament, a new bill. What is that bill going to address, all the issues that you mentioned before?
Well, the bill is a very, very comprehensive bill, and I must commend the minister for taking the initiative to get this done, because it has been languishing for quite a while. In the meantime, the resource has been declining further and further. It addresses almost everything. If you want to scuba dive, you're going to get a permit. If you want to, anybody who goes to fish has to have a permit, and there are going to be, controls on the size of fish, the where you catch fish, the seasons, and a whole range of other controls that you have to comply with. Now, the legislation is one thing. You have to have a regulatory agency to enforce the regulations. And the Fisheries Division, I know, does have a unit to do that. How effective that is would depend to a large extent also on the cooperation you get from the fisher folk, because the Fisheries Division can't be everywhere all the time. And so fishermen they have to buy into this whole thing and understand that whatever they do in terms of resource management is in fact for their benefit and for the benefit of their children and grandchildren in the long run. And once they do that, once they buy into that, it will be a lot easier to accomplish what the bill sets out to accomplish.
Are we aware of what our waters contain? Do we have enough fish to supply us?
Well, right now, I would say that I don't have empirical data to say that, but what I look at the price of fish and how much fish you're seeing in the market, how much the exporters are exporting, and you realize that there is a problem. I mean, carried in the year 2002, 3, 4, carrot was like $8 and $10 a pound. That same carrot now goes up to $40 and $50 a pound. That tells me, if you look at the law of supply and demand, it tells me there's a problem. There's not enough fish available. And the same applies to snappers and kingfish and so on and so forth. So if we take the right, do the right things, adopt the right strategies and implement these strategies, it is quite possible that we can bring these resources back to sustainability, where they will continue to supply fish, in adequate amounts to meet our needs on a continuing basis into the future.
What kind of strategies would need to be implemented?
Well, exactly what the new legislation will have, because it's going to cover everything: the type of fishing gear you use, the type of mesh you use in the fish pots and in the nets, where you fish, when you fish, what sizes you catch. It's when as I said earlier, when you catch and so on and so forth. So it's and then who is allowed to fish? How many boats are allowed into the fishery, in the particular fishery? How much you are allowed to remove from the fishery on an annual basis, and that kind of thing. So there'll be quotas given to fishermen that they will have to observe, as is done elsewhere. And a whole range of other things that will come into play. So it's a real a mix of things that has to take place that will address this problem of the condition in which the resources at present, to bring it back into sustainability.
I know that farming, fish farming, aquaculture is something that the SIDC is promoting. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Well, Trinidad and Tobago has no option but to get involved in aquaculture, and in a very big way. That's what we promote at the SIDC. Now, globally, we have noticed landings on wild stocks continue to decline, as it has declined here. And it is settling around 80 million metric tons a year. Some people say it's less. But consumption and demand has continued to grow. Luckily, aquaculture came into play. And I would say in the early 1990s, globally, we were doing about 500,000 metric tons of aquaculture product. And now we are doing well over 3 million metric tons of aquaculture product. That has in fact filled the breach, and will in fact continue to fill the breach, because I don't see the wild stocks, the landings on wild stocks increasing beyond 80 million in the foreseeable future. As a result, we have a great opportunity here from a business point of view to get involved in commercial aquaculture. Not only to meet our own needs for fish, but also to gain revenue from exports to particularly the metropolitan markets in the United States and Europe. So I see aquaculture really as a essential strategy that has to be developed. And we here at the SIDC propose the production of high-value marine species that are in high demand in these markets, because those are the species that you can export and generate profit from. And so we are starting some work along those lines. The problem we have is that how do we kind of convince investors to invest in this kind of industry, which is really very new to Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, we have tilapia farming has been around for a while, but that's very, very small scale. We are talking about large scale. I see Trinidad with the potential of being more than 100 million metric. More than 100,000 metric tons of fish annually in within 10 years, if the right strategies are put in place. The markets are there.
If aquaculture grows like you hope, then it can become a significant contributor to GDP.
It certainly has the potential to be a significant contributor to GDP. Right now, the fishing industry contributes, I think, 0.9% of GDP. I believe the figure is about 100 million TT dollars annually. Aquaculture has the potential to contribute 500 million US dollars in foreign exchange annually if it's properly developed. As I say, the markets are there. It's just a matter of us doing the right things here in developing such an industry. We are proposing actually the concept of an industrial aquaculture park. whereby, similar to the model that they have in Point Lisas, where you have a cluster, farms in one area, and these farms will have supporting industries in the park, like a feed mill, a processing facility, water treatment facilities, other service industries to repair equipment and so on and so forth. And all of these farms are operating, and all of these supporting industries are operating in this park. So what it does is really brings the cost of production down, and it allows for much, much greater efficiencies in operation, and a sharing of knowledge and ideas and even resources, as the case may be.
How far along is the proposal? Has it reached the ears of the ministers yet?
Well, it has reached the ears of the minister. But what we are doing right now, we have done a business plan for one farm, which we hope would be the nucleus out of which the industrial park will develop. So I don't think the park will come first. It's easier to get the farm going and then build the park around that farm with other farms and all the other supporting infrastructure. I'll give you an example. If you have a park that is growing 20 million pounds of fish annually, and that's small, you will need about 30 million pounds of feed. That may justify a feed mill. So investors would then have the opportunity to come and invest in setting up a feed mill. If you're growing, for instance, you're growing marine algae, from which you can extract nutraceuticals and pharmaceuticals, there's a whole potential industry to do the extraction of these things for the export market or the local market, or whatever the case may be, or for setting up pharmaceutical and nutraceutical industries right here in Trinidad. So there's a lot of downstream potential. To me, it's a fantastic concept. If we are talking about economic diversification, my view, aquaculture, the way we are proposing it is the way the country should go in terms of economic diversification and enhancing and contributing more significantly to GDP than the seafood industry is currently contributing.
I have read that farmed fish is not as healthy as its wild-caught counterparts. How is this true? What's the take?
Well, it depends on the farming technology used. I know there's a lot of concern about how fish is farmed in China. Up to yesterday, I was reading something where they're growing it in ponds and they're using sewage to, create the nutrients to grow algae so the fish could feed in that and so on and so forth. What we are proposing really in the aquaculture industrial park is nothing like that at all. We are not talking about pond culture. We're talking about what we call hyper-intensive production systems. And these are going to be done in buildings, in very controlled environments, where you control and everything that you bring into that. The feed is controlled. You have to ensure that the feed coming into that environment to feed your fish comes from, it is safely produced in a safe way that is not bringing in anything into the fish, and thereby being transferred to the consumer. Since we are targeting the export market, we have to meet their standards, and they're very, very specific in these markets in terms of food safety issues, sustainability issues. They're looking at carbon footprint, water footprint, and a whole range of other things. They're looking at the social impact, whether you're employing child labor, whether people are being paid properly. They're looking at OSH. So our farm, what we're proposing is going to be operating like that. It's not going to be a farm in a pond somewhere where you have no control what's happening.
The SIDC is making efforts to promote low preference species of fish as a source of more affordable food. Can you tell me about that?
Well, traditionally in this country, we have always tended to prefer to eat carrot and kingfish and snappers and so on. That was fine when these fish were affordable. But these fish are no longer affordable to the ordinary man out there, especially around the Lenten season. And our idea is, well, listen, there are other fish out there, much cheaper, much more available, and no less nutritious. And as a result, we are promoting the consumption of these what we call low preference species, so that the ordinary consumer will also have an opportunity to eat seafood. because seafood is a much healthier form of protein than all the other proteins. That's the whole purpose of also this would help to relieve stress on these high preference species. Because there's less demand for those species. It's quite likely there may be less fishing pressure, and they may have a greater chance of, coming back to sustainability.
Is there a plan, let's just say these low preference species become high preference species? Do we have a sustainability plan in place for this?
Well, all that will be covered under the new legislation.
An educated pilot, knowledgeable pilot, is always a safer pilot, a pilot who can assist a captain in a flight.